So we should be live right about. We should be live now. Actually, good evening, folks, and welcome. I hope you're all doing well. The start of what's meant to be a heat wave. Well, I know in Scotland. I don't know about the rest of the UK, but it's meant to be a heat wave in Scotland. So my shorts are going to be on all week, and I'm not going to apologise for it. Simple as that. But we hope you all had a pleasant weekend. So tonight, for the first time, and maybe not, hopefully not the last, we'll welcome a lovely lady, Heather P.Bayne. Former crime reporter, and she's now a best-selling author. So she was a crime reporter for about 20 years, give or take.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, just a little bit over, but yeah, 20 years. I always just say, good enough. We'll stick with that. So yeah,
it's a round enough figure, isn't it? Just 20.
I go with round. Round figures are good for me.
Actions, so stick with 20.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Facebook user. So thanks for coming in, Heather. I know we spoke last week on an interesting video call that kind of went from subject to subject. So tell us a wee bit about your crime report and how you all get into that sort of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's sort of it's sort of a bit of a long story, but I think we got time, so I won't worry too much. But
plenty of time.
Yeah, it's sort of I've actually got a real name, which is Heather Polischuk. So that's the name I was writing under for the newspaper reporting. So I was doing that for, as you said, 20-ish kind of years. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things. I actually started writing fiction when I was I don't even, basically as soon as I could spell, I was writing fiction. So I was writing like little stories and things. And I got to be sort of in my late teens, and I was writing at this point, I was writing like novels already, crime novels. I was already kind of doing all that. But at that point, it was like, well, what am I going to do with this career-wise? Like at that point, there just wasn't really anything that I thought I could do with books, right? It just didn't seem like I could make it into a career. So my parents were kind of they knew I was a writer. So they kind of gave me some nudges, why don't you go into journalism? So I went through university. I guess I was about midway through university. I was taking a political studies, political science degree at that time. And so, yeah, I ended up just applying to journalism, and that sort of was that. It was one of those things when I started in the year 2000 at a newspaper in the province where I'm from, Saskatchewan. And I don't know, I lucked out. I just slid right into crime reporting, which was exactly what I always sort of thought the area I wanted to work in. And I just slid right in there. And I was working in crime ever since. So it was basically, crime, courts, police, prisons, like all of that stuff was what I was doing. So yeah, it was I really kind of lucked into it, and it was actually a really fantastic job to work in, like obviously as a writer as well. So yeah, that's kind of the story of, I guess, the journalism side.
So when you long time ago, there's a newspaper in Glasgow called the Evening Times, and got agency work there once, driving for the editor of the Evening Times. So basically gave me a car, a mobile phone, and I just to wait about, the offices for whenever he wanted to go somewhere.
Right.
But it was good because all your meals were free.
Hey, sure.
Free. But every now and again, you had to take reporters somewhere. They would phone you and say, right, meet so and so down the stairs, 5 minutes, you're going to Baillieston, or you're going. So, you take the reporter away and they say, get me there as quick as you can.
All right.
Oh, so right, fair. So you take them there and you'd sit and wait on them while they done it, and they get back in the car. And I would say, because I'm Glaswegian, I'm kind of nosy, and I would say, so, what was going on? What's happening? Can't tell you.
Really? Oh, I might just be chattering about it. Maybe things are a little different about that, but.
And we can't tell you until we write about it. You'll read about it.
Okay. I guess it depends. If it's an investigative piece, yeah, I guess they could have been more closed-mouthed about it for sure. There were things I bit my tongue about too, just in case. So yeah, makes sense.
there was some places I took, and there were police vans and police cars outside, you know.
Yeah.
And you get the crowd standing. So you're sitting in the car and you're like, you know, what's happening? What's going on? You know, you're wanting a juicy story of it. Can I tell you?
Oh, seriously? Oh no. I was like, I talked all sorts of people about when I went to crime scenes. It was just like, you know, crime scenes are interesting because I find it's just a lot of back and forth. I just found that was sort of the interesting thing. I mean, as a reporter, I'd show up at a crime scene and you're always looking around for people to talk to. It's just like one big conversation. You're talking to this guy, you're talking to this police officer, you're talking to somebody who's, you know, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of talk, and I don't know. I found I don't know. I think I tried to. I didn't mind sharing. I mean, as much as I knew, which frankly most of the time was very little at that point, because I mean, they wasn't really a whole lot at first. Police were going to tell you, obviously. So, so yeah. I mean, I had no trouble sharing what I knew. It was basically. I mean, the thing is, it was all, you know, internet at that point anyway. So as soon as I knew it, it was online. So it's not like we had to hold anything back, right? So
basically, but I know you mean about talking. We done a live stream yesterday for the unveiling of the Wall of Soap, and it was like 3.5 hours.
yeah,
And I was trying to, and I actually thought about you when I was doing it. I was doing it as a live, so you know, you're trying to cover the different events that were going on, but I was also wanting to talk to as many people as I could. You know, and so I was walking about with the phone, and you see somebody standing, so you just go over and talk to him. But then there was maybe 2 or 3, 4 people standing, and I ended up just getting in and just railroading into their conversation.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and just, you know, a quick introduction who I was, and say, look, you mind tell us about the event? You know, you just, and I thought, we've got Heather on the morning. I wonder if that's how she felt, you know.
It's true. You really do. You do sort of find that. I think we were just chatting about that just before we went live. But the fact that like I'm a huge introvert. Like I'm actually really like really, I'm not nearly as painfully shy as I was when I was a kid. Like I used to be like lock myself in a closet shy. If we had company over, I'd just be like in my room where nobody would have to talk to anyone. So yeah, going into reporting is like a total change. Like as soon as you have to go out, and you really just have to kind of insert yourself into conversations. And the first few times I went out on an assignment, I was just like petrified because that's just not it's not my personality at all. Like I can kind of, you know, I've grown into it a bit. Now I'm a lot more open and way less shy. But it was just like when I started, it was just like, oh my Lord, what am I going to say? I don't want to interrupt these people. And like, you know, but most people just typically, I find, don't actually mind all that much. So they're happy to talk. I mean, they're all there for the same reason, right? Most people are happy to talk about the reason they're there and why it's important to them and you know, why it should be important to everybody else. And so, yeah, generally speaking, it's a nice way to come at it. It's like, we're all here for the same reason. Let's just talk about what that reason is. So.
No, you're totally right. You know, I found that yesterday. You know, some of the people I spoke to were quite important people with clan hunting and what have you. And you know, you're kind of 50-50. I got them. You know, there's one lady, Pauline, she's the 30th clan chief or clan hunter.
Right.
And I spoke to Gary, a good friend of yours, Gary, who heads up the Society of William Wallace. And I says, I want to get a hold of Lady Pauline, Madam Pauline. It's either Madam or Lady. I think it's Madam. If she's
right, okay.
Apologise. It's either Lady or Madam Pauline. And Gary said, oh, no, she's fine. Just go up to her and, you know, be your kind of... So I actually stopped the live and I went up to her. I managed to get her walking along the path herself. I thought, do you know what? It's never. I'm just going to go up and here we go. But she was really, really nice, you know, nice lady. So when you started out, you know, say there was a big incident, and you see in the films, all the reporters all standing around, they've all got their microphones and stuff. You kind of at the back, in the back row, thinking, you know, trying to, you know, before you came out of your shell.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember back to how things were when I first started. Like I was sort of lucky where I started. It was a small city. So there weren't really that many of us reporting wise anyway. So it was kind of, I didn't really have an opportunity to sit in the back. It was like, basically I started, it was just like, shove me out the door and you're on your own and you just go get the story and that's it. So it was basically kind of getting thrown off the deep end right off the start, which is the best thing that could have happened to me. So, I think I just kind of, I sort of had to really find that sort of comfort, I guess, quite quickly. The one thing I never got used to ever is when we had to make that phone call to a family that had just lost somebody to, say, a homicide or something like that. I never stopped being nervous about making those calls. Like it just always feels like a horrible thing. And it's one of those things that's really, people are really 50-50 about them. It's like lots of people, like I know people always think you sort of sound like a horrible person because you make these calls, but you'd actually be amazed how many families love talking about their loved one. Like they want their loved one to not be just a name and a statistic. They want people to know that they were a real person and this is what they were like and this is why they were important. And so yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, you can make one call to one family and get told to, F off, but the next family is really happy to be able to talk about that person. So it's one of those things that's an important part of covering a story, so you can put a face to these victims and show people who they were. But it didn't matter. I knew why I was doing it and I knew why it was important to do it, but I still was just so nervous every time I had to make that call, and that never changed. I remember the first time I had to make a call like that, I went and locked myself in the bathroom at the office for like 20 minutes trying to get my stomach to settle down because I was just so nauseous. I just thought, I just did not want to make that call. But it actually went really well. So I was kind of lucky that the first call I made like that was a family who was really happy to talk about, their loved ones. So I kind of lucked out. I think if that first call had been somebody who just told me to, sod off, it would have been really horrible.
You don't know. I mean, obviously, it's probably the most horrible situation you come out losing a loved one, especially if it's homicide, whatever. But you just don't know how people are going to react.
No. Yeah.
So it's I think it's that first 5-10 seconds. Not that I'm any expert. I think it would be the first 5-10 seconds of the call.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
My H.P.Bayne, from, and then it's that kind of that 5-second kind of, are they going to hang up? They're going to tell me where to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not exactly the nicest kind of situation.
No, that's the thing. And I mean, sometimes people come around too. I remember, another thing we would do is when, the person accused of the homicide would appear in court for the first time, the family would often go, of the family of the victim. So if we couldn't reach them ahead of time, we would try to, talk to them at court. So I remember this one family, the first time I'd approached them in court, they did tell me to basically F off, right? I mean, it was very, they were very angry. But the thing is, you never take it personally, because it wasn't angry at me, I think, per se. They were very obviously angry that their loved one had been taken from them as he had been. So I know you try to always remember, okay, it's not about me. It's just, but it was, so yeah, that first meeting was like, oh, okay. But they actually called me up a few days later, or a week later, maybe. And they wanted to talk. And I sat down with them in their living room, and I actually ended up establishing a really good relationship with the whole family. Like, it was just, you sort of get to know them so well over the course of those few years that a case takes to go through the courts. So yeah, sometimes they start off, sometimes those relationships kind of start off really rocky, but they kind of come around a little bit too when they start to, those first few days are obviously going to be like, horribly, horribly emotional. And, you're going through the gamut of shock and, the worst pain I can imagine as a family member, as a loved one. And then, and anger, and like, it's just like every emotion, like you can imagine. So it's just like such a whirlwind for them those first few days, I think, no matter what. And then, sometimes as things start to settle, they get to a point then where they're, then they're more into the state where, yeah, we want people to know who this person was. So it just depends. Everybody's different, and some people never want to talk about them. So, and that's fair. You know what? That is completely fair. So you just have to kind of, you get to know people through court and find out if, they're going to be comfortable or not, and if they're not, that's absolutely their right. So yeah.
And I suppose, as you say, the first few days, a shell shock basically, because this thing's happened and so's to blame, and they'll get 200 different emotions running through their head at the same time. But after that kind of initial shock, I would imagine disappears. As you say, you went and visited the family and you got to know them really well. You think you become a kind of voice for the family.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched quite a few crime documentaries, and you see, reporters and interviewers talk to victims' families, and they stay with them over the course of X amount of months, and I think the family tends to gel to them because they see this person as a kind of voice,
Mm-hmm.
they can get our story out there for people to listen to us and not just to what's said in court, but to us.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. And it was one of those things I always had to be so careful about too, because I think I always wanted to make it clear, obviously, with families that I was, happy to be a voice for them, kind of a channel in a sense, between them and the public. But I also couldn't be their advocate, because I think that was one thing I struggled with is sometimes, because as a reporter, I had to be unbiased. Like when I went into a courtroom, I had to present both sides. And I mean, sometimes an accused person's background is absolutely lots of times, actually, their backgrounds are absolutely tragic. Full of abuse, full of, some of the most horrific things happen to them. In fact, lots of them have been through losing family members to homicide as well, when you start to hear about them. So, you do have to present that side too. And it's just, I know some victims' families get very angry because they don't think that, and that's, it's completely fair for them to feel angry, obviously. But, I had to do my job, which is present both sides. So I always had to sort of make it clear, like, yeah, I'm here to be a voice for you, but I have to be a voice for everybody. So it's just, that's the tricky part, is sort of kind of walking that line and trying to make sure I'm doing it fairly, even if all of my sympathy, like personally speaking, all of my sympathy is always kind of there, but my sympathy cannot come into play as a reporter, right? I had to stay, for the job, I had to just sort of be right down the middle. So yeah, it can be tricky and it can be hard, and for families, obviously it can be very hard to, kind of feel like maybe their side's not being represented as much as they feel it should, or that they prefer the other side not be represented as it is. But there's a job to do, and I still had to kind of push sometimes those feelings aside quite a bit to do the job. So
to leave your emotions at the door. Do you think the reporters sometimes get a raw deal? You see a lot in films, and I know it's only films, but
right.
Something will happen, and you get about 20 or 30 reporters outside somebody's house, and as soon as the person opens their blinds, the microphones are in, and they're screaming and shouting all these. Do you think reporters kind of get shown in a bad light at times?
I think, I can only speak for Canada, obviously. So I don't want to presume to speak for another country's media, because I think everybody operates a little different. I know Canada versus the US, from what I've seen, our systems work a little differently, and outlets sort of have their own way of functioning. And even in Canada, so like larger cities will function different from smaller cities. So like I've worked in, what I'd consider probably smaller cities in Canada. And yeah, I would say from my perspective, I've never stood outside the door and screamed at somebody. I don't think I've ever done that. I have gone to a couple of doors and knocked. I mean, definitely I've done door knocking to try to find somebody that I wanted to talk to. I mean, I've done that plenty, but it's just usually me by myself, and I knock and somebody there, oh, hi, can you talk to me, or yes or no? And we have the conversation or we don't, and that's the end of it. I've never kind of, I know I see that all the time where reporters park outside on TV, like where reporters will park outside somebody's house for like days on end waiting. I don't think anybody has the resources to do that anymore, like anywhere in the world. I think
maybe, 10, 20 years ago, whatever.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but nowadays days, I don't think that means nowadays. I don't think they've. That's Craig. We got Laura's in as well. That's just how someone just now using their Wi-Fi. So thanks, guys. They're husband, our team. But I've seen a few of the films, and you get the reports. Get out of my face, get away. Have some respect and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But it must have took. 20 years doing it. You must have seen so many different. You've been a crime reporter as well. So many different sort of stories, crimes. What's the kind of most bizarre one you've ever?
Oh, well, yeah. You know what? I've got. There's sort of two levels of bizarre. There's like horrific bizarre, and then there's just really weird, funny bizarre. So, I've kind of had both. So. We've done I did some really sort of really funny stories. We had one guy that was was sentenced for going around and squeezing all the bread loaves in the grocery stores, and finally they tried to kick him out, and he kept coming in and squeezing the bread. So they finally ended up having to charge him criminally with mischief, basically. So it was a weird one. He said he was testing for freshness. But anyway, so it was silly things like that. We had one guy that was, we used to sort of call him Dine and Dash Dan, because he used to be one of these guys. He had a huge criminal record for going into restaurants and eating a huge meal, ordering all this food, ordering alcohol, and then running away without paying for it. And he had this huge record for this. And so, he had a bunch of restaurants he couldn't go into, because as soon as he set foot through the door, he was kind of persona non grata, basically. So anyway, at the end of every number of court dates, he would invite the judge at the end to go for supper with him, which obviously didn't pan out. But anyway, yeah, no, so we have some interesting characters. I don't know, I've seen some really bizarre ones. There was some really horrific ones as well, which, dismemberment cases and just some really, really awful stuff that cropped up as well, which, I remember it sort of became sadly more common. Like there were some really awful, awful cases toward the end of my career. And I remember talking to a couple of police officers about this. I got to know quite a few police officers and then established a really good relationship with a lot of them. And so we would have a lot of chats about these things. And I know we talked about that a bunch of times, like cops who were of similar vintage to me, like when they started and when I started, like how things had been different and how it felt like things were just getting more violence, it seemed like, toward the time that I left. So yeah, there was sort of an increasing number of like horrible cases like that. It was just kind of some really, really nasty things. So I was kind of at that point, it's one of the reasons that I just thought, okay, I think maybe I've kind of had my fill of this already. So it was a good time to move on.
Time to hang up my pen and move my pen.
Yeah, it wasn't the sole reason. That was just one of several reasons. But I've got a pretty thick skin. After years of covering, I've seen just about everything. But so I've got a pretty thick skin. But it just kind of came in sort of in combination with other things that were going on, with the job and with the business and frankly with my own writing, which was doing really well. And I thought, I can do this full time. So why not do that? So yeah, it was like a combination of things that just kind of sort of ushered me toward the end of my career in journalism. So yeah.
And then I'm going to come here, right? But one question, obviously we're a paranormal channel as well as history. So I need to ask you, did you ever get any paranormal stories? I think it was your editor or whoever would give you a story. Did you ever get spooky stuff?
I hunted them down myself because I've, as you can imagine, being somebody who writes ghost fiction now. Obviously I've had I have had, like a lifelong interest in the paranormal as well. So it's been one of those things I always found fascinating, and ghosts in particular. So yeah, I had proposed a couple of times, like around Halloween, because it seemed like that was the only time you could kind of push it. But I did a couple of stories around Halloween about paranormal type stuff. We talked to a medium one year. The coworker and I, she loved all that stuff too. So she and I kind of joined forces on these things. So we did talk to a medium one Halloween, and then another one we did a kind of a ghost stories, a compilation of different ghost stories from the city where I was working at the time, which Regina. So yeah, I did kind of manage to swing a few of them. I didn't do a whole lot of them because I tended to be so busy with the crime stuff, but once in a while I would manage to sort of finagle my way into doing a ghost story for the papers. So that was awesome.
So did you ever cover a ghost story and it turned out to be real, or, so they were all fake? I know there's a lot of different stories out there that turn out to be nothing,
Yeah.
But did you ever get one that kind of freaked you out or spooked you? Or?
I don't think I don't. It's one thing, I don't get spooked very easily, but there was one story I know in Regina, we talked to one business owner, and it was a bit creepy. Like he had worked in the place they bought basically was his old house. Like it's been in the city for, it's probably about a century old now, which in Regina is old. I know it's not old for Scotland, but no, it's old. It's no.
Are you building in Scotland?
I know nothing lasts here. I think it's the cold. Everything is just like, it lasts very little time. So yeah, I think it's about a century old anyway. But anyway, so this house had this story about a former owner who'd moved away, and I guess she was just so attached to the house that after she passed away, she came back. So anyway, it's a whole pile of stories. It's actually quite I think notorious, in the city. I think everybody kind of knows about that place being haunted. So anyway, the owner of at that time, he had said he had bought it and they'd converted it. So they had I think at that time they'd had a cafe. It was sort of like a cafe tour in one side of it. So they had the old kitchen area, still being used obviously for food prep and all that. And he said he had a young worker at that time. I think she was probably late teens, early 20s, university student basically. And she had been closing up that evening by herself. And she said she turned around. She was in the kitchen in the back of the house, and she turned around and she said, "There's a woman standing there," like basically an old lady with kind of a white dress, if I'm recalling it correctly. It's a while ago since he told me the story, but so she's standing there in this white dress, and this girl is like, well, trying to be polite, well, we're closed, she looked real, like solid. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, I'm sorry, we're closed. Like, can you, come back tomorrow? And I'll, and all this. And I guess, so this woman just rushes like straight at her and went through her. So I mean, this poor girl, I guess she ran out the door. She didn't lock it. She just ran out the door, and she phoned her boss from like I think a service station nearby, and just was like, "I'm sorry." She said, "I left it open," and she told him what happened. And she said, she don't think she went back to work again there, which I don't blame her. I think if that happened to me, I'd probably be pretty freaked out too. So yeah, that was it's a creepy story. I thankfully didn't. Like I say, if one of those things, if it happened to me, I'd probably be nervous. Like I don't get creeped out by much, but that might do it. So
actually, see, I mean, I've had a few experiences, in my time. I've had my sleeve pulled and I felt somebody standing beside me, things like that.
Yeah.
During investigations, I always seem to be, it's very sound big headed, but the team will back me up, always seem to be quite popular. It's always my name that comes out, or, Scott, he's here, kind of, thing. And it doesn't really freak me out. I love all that kind of stuff, but
yeah.
You see that girl worked in a cafe. I used to work in a was a steakhouse over here, and kitchen was downstairs. And one of the girls had reported one night seeing two little boys on the restaurant level, which was the middle level, and it kind of freaked her out. But in the kitchen, you had a swing door at either end, and when the door opened, it made a noise. You heard it. And one night, I was down there myself, finishing off, and I heard the door. So I looked over, nobody there. And then it happened again. So I went up the stairs, and there was only one girl up the stairs. I said, "Were you down the stairs?" She says, "No, I've been up here. I've not been." I said, "Well, twice that door's been swinging about." Yeah. And then she told me the story of the girl that seen the two. She says, "That's probably two little boys." I said, "Two little boys?" She says, "Maybe, I can't mind the girl's name now. It was that long ago." She says, "So-and-so saw these two little boys standing in the restaurant sort of thing." And that sort of freaked her out a wee bit, but I love all that stuff. I know. I want to get booked.
I know. You know what's always interesting to me is how many times I've heard people say that when they see a ghost, it looks like a real person and a solid person. And I mean, I've actually had that experience myself. Like I was, when I was working up in Prince Albert, I was living in this apartment building. And I spent a lot of weekends at the farm where I'm living now, and would just drive. It's about an hour and a half drive each way. So by the time I would get back at the end of the weekend, it would generally be, getting toward, it's basically nighttime already, so dark. And I remember getting back one night to the apartment in Prince Albert, and my parking spot, to try to explain, like there's an entrance off the street to drive into the parking lot, and my parking spot was only about, I think it was 3 in from there, and there was like a dumpster there right beside the roadway. So anyway, when I was getting up to the entrance to the parking lot, like I was just driving down the street, and I stopped there because there was this man, like, I say walking, I use the term very loosely. He was limping like really, really badly. And it took him a long time to get across. And I remember watching him thinking, boy, he looks like he's really badly hurt. So anyway, so I pulled in, finally he crosses, and I pulled into my parking spot, which is right there. And I sat there for a minute just watching, because I was like, okay, like, is he okay? Like, or, and then I was like, I'm by myself. I'm, at that point in my early 20s. I was, I wasn't really sure, okay, if he's intoxicated or something. I wasn't sure, safety wise, what I should do. So I kind of watched for a minute, but I never saw him. And I thought, well, where did he go? So I got out of my car and I looked everywhere, because I thought, I thought maybe he fell down. I thought maybe he fell in the dumpster. He's not in the dumpster. There's this huge field on the other side of the parking lot. There's nowhere this guy could have gone. And he was just gone. He vanished completely. And I mean, I've got no other explanation for it other than I must have seen a ghost, because like, what else would it be when this guy is just gone? Like, he could not move fast enough to get away from me. That like, cause this huge field, there's nowhere he could have gone. So yeah, it was bizarre. So it is funny. Like I hear that from other people too, like how often ghosts, when they see them, look like a real solid person. Like, you don't always know right away that it's actually a ghost. You probably could have a whole conversation with somebody and not know it.
That's 100%. But spot on. You're saying, people have asked me a few times, well, what does a ghost look like? What's a spirit look like? And so, well, I don't know. I mean, ghosts are portrayed in so many different forms. I mean, the old one, the white sheep with the eyes, the
Scooby-Doo version,
Scooby-Doo version, and then you've got, the black shadow, you've got the see-through apparition, and you get solid ones. I mean, Laura, and she's seen, there's a place we do, Loudon Kirk, she saw a gentleman there quite a few times, and another team we work closely with called Spig. Their lead investigator, myself, done an investigation there one night, and he's seen this. He said it was a shadow of a man going across the path. So they've seen that. There was one night we were with Spig at a Kirkyard, and 3 of them saw you've got the Kirkyard, and at the top end you've got a car park where our cars are parked. three of them saw what they described as a guy with a grey top on. Now this place is in the middle of the countryside.
Yeah.
It's middle of anywhere. But he walked across the car park. So one of the guys, he ran up because he thought maybe somebody was, going to mess about with the cars.
Yeah.
This guy just vanished, just thin air.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere he could have, there was only two roads, and we looked down both of them. I never get to see them,
Yeah.
And we've done a few investigations, and they'll see shadows or white mist, and I'm like, why do I never get to see them? Why that misses it,
But that's the thing. Maybe you've seen them and you don't know that you've seen them. That's the thing, right? Because sometimes if they appear solid, how would you even know? So
you could be walking in town,
yeah,
and you walk past a spirit. You really don't know what spirit actually looks. You've got a rough idea, basically. Everybody's got their own concept of what spirit looks like, but do we really know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. And it's interesting because, maybe manifestations are different. You get there's the orb sort of thing, and then there's the shadow thing, and then there's the solid figure thing, or the white shimmery thing. I think people have, stories about all of those things. One is not necessarily wrong or who knows? Maybe, I don't know how this stuff works. From a physics standpoint, maybe there is a certain element of it takes just this much more energy to manifest in this way versus maybe just being an orb or something. So, so there's I don't know. There's probably a whole, like I say, it's an interesting, maybe a whole physics side to all of this that we just haven't got our heads around yet, but it's interesting to me.
See, that's we don't get near. I know there's a lot of groups out there, no disrespect to them, they kind of look into the sciencey side and stuff like that, and we prefer just to be basic, plain and simple.
Well, it gets, who knows? How do you begin to explain it from any perspective? Because there's so much. That's the whole reason it's considered unexplained, right?
Exactly. And people say to me, well, what happens when you die? What happens when you pass over? Where do you go? Do you go to heaven? Do you go to hell? What happens? Do you hang about here? Well, we don't really know. See, you're a paranormal investigator. You should know. No, really. That's we people call us investigators, but that's all. We'll go out, do investigations. We might not get any evidence whatsoever. We've had quite a few nights with that, but we've had nothing.
Well, if you want to compare it to police work, police officers investigate crimes all the time that they can't solve. So sometimes there just isn't an answer that you can find right now based on the evidence you have in front of you. That's just how it is. And what are you going to do? And especially when you're dealing with things like the paranormal, it's not like there's a handbook somewhere that's going to tell you what this means or that means. So
see, it's the old expert. See, when people tell me, say I'm an expert in the paranormal, I think, no.
I hate that term.
Yeah. And I'm a specialist.
Yeah.
Are you really? I
always wonder that. I know I see that all the time when I'm watching paranormal shows. Like somebody's an expert in the paranormal. I'm like, what makes somebody an expert? I just from sitting in court over the years, I know what makes somebody an expert in forensics. I know what makes somebody an expert in gangs or somebody an expert in blood spatter or something. Like that's very obvious. Okay, you went away, you studied this, you took a course on it, you know how this works and this works, point A to point B, what happens. Like that's very obvious. You can see that. I don't know what makes someone an expert in something when you don't really have, any way to sort of study it, I think, in any real way, right?
We've heard of people who call themselves qualified paranormal investigators, and you think, well, and they'll say, well, we did a course online, so now we're qualified, and we get a badge, to say that we're a paranormal investigator. And I've said this on shows before. Can you just imagine somebody turning up at a graveyard or something with this badge, Scott Mathewson, PI, paranormal. It's ludicrous, and people say, as you say, forensic experts, all the rest of it, they go to college, they go to university, they study, they sit exams, all the, everything. And but with the paranormal, there's no paranormal school. You can be more experienced than somebody, but it doesn't make you a better investigator.
Yeah.
You could be in 200. You could have done 200 investigations, and you've got a wee guy comes along who's done 5.
Mm.
And he might gather more evidence than you. So you can have that more experience aspect, and you can help each other, give each other wee tips. We Spig, it was something to say about a cat ball, and it was one of the Spig guys, David. We were talking one night about cat balls. We use them quite a lot, and he says, "Why don't you stick it in a glass? Just a normal glass." I thought, "Oh, I never thought of doing that."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "That's what we do. So we stick the ball in a glass." And it worked for us. I think we were trying to get it to sit still. There was something I couldn't work out. He says, "Put it in a glass." So you can give each other wee tips and advice. Try this, try that. But it's when it comes down to I'm an expert in the paranormal. Right? You're an expert.
Well, I think sometimes too, and I mean, I think there are probably people who are called experts who don't want to be called experts. I remember some police officer I knew who was with the gang unit in the city where I was working, and they were trying to classify him as an expert for a purpose of a trial, and he was just so anxious. He was like, "I don't want to be called an expert." He's like, "Well, they're going to just tear me to shreds." So I think there's probably that, but I think the other problem you get into is the people who want to be called experts and go with that title. I think sometimes you get to the point where you risk that getting stuck into your opinions too much. It's like you feel like, okay, this is what I know, and this has to be right because I'm an expert in this field. So sometimes I think too, it's like anything. It's like, well, like science. I mean, things change all the time. I mean, as you say, you could get an investigator in who shows you something completely different. And because you're open to hearing something new, you've now learned something new, right? Mm-hmm. If you go in sort of closed-minded and thinking, well, I already know everything, you miss out on so many, you miss out on those learning opportunities. So I think sometimes when you call yourself an expert or get stuck into that feeling like you are an expert, you do sort of miss out on those learning like those opportunities that will present themselves where you get somebody, like you said, 5 times maybe he's been out, but he's got a whole new thing that could maybe teach you. So yeah, so I don't know. It's an interesting area.
It is. I mean, we're about 3 years old in July, and we've had our ups and downs, and some of the stuff that I've seen or heard basically for different sources. You think, seriously? We had one guy commenting on our page maybe last year sometime, and we welcome comments. Everybody's comments. Everybody's got a different view, as you know, Heather, and we don't always agree. We're never always going to agree with everything. So we welcome views and comments. If somebody doesn't agree with a picture we put up or something we've said, fair enough. We'll listen to people's opinions. But we had one guy, and it was something to do with, he was saying that we were stating was paranormal, and I tried to talk to the guy. I says, "Look, no," I said, "we never state anything as paranormal. We always say, we try and debunk it, and then we can't explain it, but we never." And he went on. I think Laura or Sarah was involved in it as well. He was one of these guys. He was just goading for an argument,
Yeah.
Then you hit us with, well, I run a network of expert investigators,
right.
So I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
We got to the stage. I thought, just kick him. Just put him out. We've had this guy's just not going to go away.
No, you're just some people you're just not going to win an argument with because they're just never going to quit arguing. So yeah, I've had lots of those too. So I totally get you.
We tried to be as nice as possible. We were polite about it. We didn't say F off or anything,
Yeah.
Polite about it, but I've come to the end of the tracks with this guy. I can't go anywhere with him, but he's still banging on. So just kick him. Get rid of him. That's him going.
Yeah, you gotta know when to sort of cut your losses sometimes. Yeah.
You've got to know when to say, time.
Yeah.
So Sullivan Gray series, you went from crime reporting to writing. Tell us about Sullivan.
That guy. Yeah. that guy there.
Mr. Gray. No,
yeah.
he's Mr. Gray. The other Mr. Gray.
Yeah, no, it was kind of a weird thing. Like I had always been writing crime fiction. I'd never wrote, like, despite the fact I was absolutely fascinated with paranormal, like I'd always just written straight crime fiction, this plain old crime fiction, like police procedure. Like I had this whole sort of series set with just, a couple of partners working in the police, and that's the whole thing I was working on. And when I decided I wanted to start publishing, which I'd frankly been too chicken to try before. And then I turned 40 and it was like, I wouldn't mind trying, because one of my coworkers actually at the paper had kind of put me on to like Mark Dawson and Joanna Penn, like a couple of the big names in self-publishing. And so I actually sort of for the first time realized, oh, okay, you know what? I could actually do this. I can actually publish stuff. So just was in the course of doing that I started to do some genre research, and I realized that how, like, I knew already like how heavily populated the charts are, like how many books there are in just like plain crime fiction. Like there's just piles and piles and piles. It's really saturated. So trying to get seen in that particular larger genre is really tricky. So I was trying to look into ways to break it down. And there was this guy, Alex Newton. He runs this company, it's K-Lytics. He puts together these amazing basically analytics based on what's sort of selling right now on Amazon charts. And so I picked up one of his things, and one of the things that said was a really hot niche at that time was ghost suspense under the crime umbrella. And I remember looking at that thinking, oh, wait a minute, I could do that. It's like, I could actually throw ghosts into my crime fiction, and I could, make a go of it maybe. So that's I had this sort of idea for kind of springing out of that. And so, yeah, Sullivan Gray kind of just came out of that. He kind of became like, I wanted to have somebody who, like, I wanted it to be crime fiction. So I wanted it to be kind of, murder mysteries, basically. But I just was trying to figure out a way I could make that happen. And I just sort of created this character then, Sullivan, who's basically a fellow who sees ghosts, but only the ghosts of homicide victims. So anyway, obviously, and then his brother at the start of the series is a police officer. So, and then as things go on, they become private investigators. So, anyway, so yeah, it was kind of born out of that. It was partially like, it was sort of a marketing decision, but at the same time, it was a marketing decision that I could really get behind, because I was really excited about the idea of, like, just changing things up a little bit and throwing some ghosts into my crime fiction and seeing what happened. And it actually worked really well. I mean, it's found a really good audience, and yeah, and it just, I don't know, I've been able to spin it into a full-time job, which I never thought I'd be able to do, with my fiction. So it's been amazing.
And as you found that kind of niche in the market, usually crime stories, they're everywhere,
Oh, yeah.
No disrespect to the writers, but people probably say, another crime story, another crime novel. But with you including sort of paranormal into it as well, with the ghost side of it, it is different.
Yeah, I hope that's what I'm hoping. And I mean, I know I try to keep it. It's one of those things. I think sometimes people look at paranormal fiction and think, oh, it's going to be completely off the wall and crazy. I do try to ground it in reality as much as I can. I mean, you and I have talked already today about victims of crime and people who are accused of crimes and investigators involved in solving crime. And I mean, I wanted to base as much as I could in reality. I mean, I do try to when I create characters, I want them to be real people. Like, I want them to be representations in a sense of people that I've met, and I want to show experiences that I've seen over my years, over my career. So I do try to build all of that in. So it's still, it's So I mean, I'm hoping it's, as far as what I've heard, I think it sort of reads that way. So I feel like I'm hopefully doing justice to that. Yeah.
And you know, you've got all your years as a crime reporter behind you, so you've got all that experience, and you know, you try and usually keep it grounded. I mean, you think about it, you know, your stories involve this gentleman who just sees the victims, goes to the victims of crimes, but then in real life, you know, there is a theory that, you know, if murder victims do come back, if their murders have never been solved, they come back and they try to find ways to communicate to say who actually, you know, murdered them, or, you know, done whatever they did. So I think it's a brilliant kind of concept. So when you were creating, so the Sullivan, it's going to sound a stupid question, but, you know, I'm kind of famous for my silly questions. Did it become a part of your life kind of thing?
Did it, like the books?
No, the character Sullivan.
Oh, did it become a part of my life? Yeah, definitely. I think, like, I think part of the thing, like, Sullivan is definitely, I wouldn't say he's like me at all, but I feel like all of our characters, maybe he is, right? I mean, I feel like every time you create a character, it's sort of a part of you somewhere. And I do feel like, I think the way that Sully listens to people, I know I something I strove for. I mean, certainly in my job. So I feel like I think he approaches people the same way I approach them during my crime reporting days. So I think that I have in common with him. So I think there's that. But in terms of becoming a part of my life, you know, I always feel like anytime I write anything, it sort of becomes a part of my life because they really become real. I don't know. I'm one of those people, when I write characters, they do become very real for me. So I don't just sort of get to put, you know, shut the laptop down and that's the end of it. It's always kind of spinning through my head about what's going to happen with this person. And so, yeah, I don't know. I sort of feel like in that context that, yeah, definitely they're definitely a part of things everywhere I go and everything I do. I'm always constantly on the lookout for, that would be, you know, maybe that would be an interesting situation to put Sully into or whatever. And so it's, you know, this would be an interesting case for him and his brother to solve, or, you know, so there's always that element. Yeah, it definitely sort of becomes a part of your daily existence, you know, sort of no matter what you do, right?
The reason I'm asking is many years ago, I went to college, many years ago, you know, and I went to college and I done media studies, and part of the course was creative writing. And so I used to write short stories and what have you. And I was actually an ex-relative of mine says, "Why don't you try writing a screenplay?"
Mm-hmm.
You know. And I actually enjoyed the writing. I actually had one wee desk up the stairs, you know, where, but at the time it was top of the range computer, but now it'd be like an antique, you know, sort of thing. And I would just disappear up into the room, and that'd be door shut, and that'd be me. And she says, "Why don't you try doing a screenplay kind of thing?" I'm like, "You kidding me on, you know, I'm nothing, I'm just writing silly wee stories." But I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. And so I said, well, I need characters, you know. So what I did was I made up a list of, I think it was about 20 questions, and I gave them to individual people, you know, what their favourite food, dress sense, music, kind of thing, that, you know. And I said, going to answer these questions for me. It was nothing too personal, you know. And she's going to answer these questions. So they actually printed all the sheets. It was a questionnaire. I was handing it on my friends, you know. And I got them all back in, and I just chose bits and pieces off of each one to make up a character, if that makes sense.
Well, that's a cool way to do it. Yeah.
And so you were getting a bit of everything, you know, his favourite food, favourite music, does he drink, does he smoke, you know, and I would just take it off these sheets, and I built up this sort of character. It never went anywhere. It turned into a hobby. It took me months to do, but I did write it, you know, but I ended up in a drawer in the bedroom, and that was the end of it. But I did enjoy it. So that's what I was asking, because when I was doing it, you know, one of the characters was called Nick, you know, and a very original name for somebody. Nick. But he did become a part of your life, and you think, well, what would Nick do in a situation like this? You know?
Yeah, it's true. You know, one thing I do find, like, what I love about character, what I love about writing, is how characters are really start to take on a life of their own in a way. Like I have this sort of secondary character in the Sullivan Gray series that, and the Braddock and Gray case or case files, which follows up on that. But I have a secondary character in that who I've recently given her own book, Ray Mallory. And when I first wrote her, I had this idea of her kind of almost being like another Sully, kind of like a counterpart to Sully. Mm-hmm. And I remember taking her up, you know, I had her going up the stairs and going up to the suite and knocking on the door. And it was so weird as I'm writing this thing. She suddenly, in my mind, she suddenly kicks the door in. And I was like, hold on a sec. Like, that's completely not her character that I had in my head. But just, you know, it's almost like sort of these characters kind of take on a life of their own and they start to almost tell you what they want to do, right? And I mean, so she actually became ex-military because she just, which I hadn't expected. So she kind of became one of these, you know, a lot tougher than I had envisioned with her going in. So yeah, and I've actually have a lot of fun writing her because of that. She's a lot, she's just kind of, she's quirky and she's, you know, interesting, and she's kind of got this really kind of tough past, and you know, kind of that tough inner core, which I love about her. But I hadn't seen it coming. It's sort of like sometimes characters, you know, you think you're creating this person, and then it turns out to be completely different. So.
I'm saying you're talking about an experience, right? I'm going back 25, 30 years or something like that when I had my wee writing spiel. But I used to carry a wee notebook about with me and a pen. I don't know if you do it.
I do it all the time. Me too.
I remember one particular time I was in Glasgow and St Enoch Square. I don't know if you know it or not. Yeah. I was sitting and there was all these people. It was kind of running about lunchtime, and so there's people, you know, running about trying to get lunch. You know, the usual chaos. But I noticed this one guy who was just strolling out. He was trying to light a cigarette, and I don't know how many times he stopped and he tried it. Never worked. It was too windy, whatever, and he wasn't in any hurry. You know, it was totally oblivious to everything that was going on around him. He was focused just on this cigarette, and then he just strolled away. You know, there was nothing special about him, but he just seemed to stick out for the crowd. And actually, I wrote a wee short story called The Way to Be. You know, and in this life, everybody's always rushing, but if everybody just takes a step back and thinks, you know, I don't need to rush about, I'll get there wherever I'm going. And this was it. To me, this looked like this guy's attitude. So, you know, I was out with my notebook, guy, saying, blah, blah, blah.
I totally see that. I mean, I would have totally noticed that guy too. And it would have been the same thing. I'd be sitting there, you know, as a writer, your brain is just constantly going, what's he thinking about? What's he doing? Like, what's he here for? And, you know, I know you're always trying to get into their brain. And so, yeah, I totally, I'd be in there with my notebook too. So.
You're thinking he's trying to light a cigarette, but where's he going? Is he working? Is he, you know, is it his day off? Does he just, you know, he's not caught up in the rat race that is life kind of thing. So it starts opening up your mind to all these different scenarios, different questions about this one particular guy who's just an ordinary Joe, you know, off the street. And so that's how I was asking about how you go about making up your characters and what have you, because I had a wee bash at it, but it didn't go.
But that's true though. Like honestly, like you know, just sitting in court every day was like one of the best places for me to sort of come up with character. I mean, not that I don't think I've ever specifically based a character on somebody that I met in court, but it's like you take little elements, right? I mean, okay, well, this is how this person would react to this, and this is, so yeah, I mean, it's true. You just kind of, it's a great thing about being a writer is it makes you a lot more observant, I think, sometimes to what what's going on around you, I think, in general, and you kind of look for the nuances everywhere.
Mhm.
So that's really what I love. I do tend to be I tend to overthink a lot when I go out. So yeah, I think in that sense, definitely, like everywhere I go, I take my writing with me, even if, you know, a lot of the time I'm actually physically taking my writing, because I take my laptop with me or my iPad with me almost everywhere I go now. But so I physically have it if I want to write something. But yeah, even without that, you do to kind of take it everywhere you go, because it's sort of just it just becomes part of you and who you are. So
you tend to notice the little things that other people do. It's not, you know, I made myself sound like some kind of mad stalker or something like that.
No, I get it.
It's yeah, it's just little things, you know. It's like another time I was sitting and there was a guy sitting on a bench. I was sitting in a square, actually. I used to go to St. Enoch's a lot. It was beautiful during the summer. But I was watching this guy and his facial expressions changed. And I started wondering, what's he just thought about? Because nothing around him had changed.
Yeah.
You know, nothing had happened. But you could see this change in his face, as if he just kind of thought about it. And so you start, I wonder what he's thinking, you know.
Yeah.
And you don't want to go over and ask him, you know, mate, I saw your face changing. But
Well, that's when you start making up stories about somebody, though. That's the fun part, right? That's when you can sort of create some sort of story in your brain about what might be going on with him. So it's fun.
it's you start thinking, you know, I wonder what he's like, you know, and you can build up your own picture. You might be totally wrong, you know, the whole picture. Totally wrong. So, how long does it usually take you to put one of your novels together?
Well, I do
kind of routine or
well, I do 4 books a year. So I do kind of roughly speaking, every 3 months, except at Christmas, when I do a one at Halloween, obviously. It seems like the thing to do. And then I always try to do a Christmas one as well. So that really gives me like this really compressed time to get one together. But generally it's been 4 a year. This past year I did 5. Yeah, this year it's going to be 5, because I put out that first Ray Mallory book in February, I think it was. So this year it's going to end up, I think, being 5 books. So yeah, generally it takes me about that long. I just have to I think that's where it's really helpful being a former journalist, because I'm just so used to writing really fast and B, writing to deadline. So I just have to make sure, like I always have a deadline with my editor for whatever book is coming up. So I know I have to have the book done by such and such a date. So I just have to make sure I schedule out exactly how much I need to get written sort of per day in order to hit that goal. So, you know, and I mean, there are days, you know, where things come up in life and you have to go and do something else. And then you just have to make sure that, you know, you kind of give yourself more time the next day to work on it. But it all gets done. I mean, sometimes it's been a major like cram toward the end sometimes, where I think, oh, it's never going to get done. And I've had to recently ask for an extension by a few days on one, because it was just, you know, I kind of overbooked myself with, you know, that Ray Mallory book earlier this year. So it kind of unfortunately cost me some writing time for the Sullivan Grace story I was writing. But like I say, it all gets done, and more or less on time. That was the only time I think I've had to ask for an extension. So I think I generally do okay. So.
That's what I was going to ask you. Have you ever had you talk your deadlines? Have you ever had a deadline, say the end of June for about, and it's like the middle of June, and you're thinking, OMG, I'm never going to finish this, and you just get kind of writer's block. I know it's happened to me, no writer's block, but on shows sometimes you go to ask something and the question just disappears out your head.
I know that happens. I know that happens to me more in conversation than in writing. That's the lucky thing. I think if I'm talking to somebody, the same thing happens to me as what you just described. I'll be talking to somebody and it's like brain fart. It's gone. I guess it's out the ear. So yeah, that happens to me in conversation often enough. But luckily with writing, you have a lot of leeway that way, because you can kind of, I'll get a little bit of writer's block one day, but there's sort of no better cure for writer's block than knowing you've got a deadline coming up. So you have to make it happen. You just have to do it. I kind of, I think for me, the whole pre-order thing has been a big help too. Like I always try to set up a pre-order for the next book when I release one. So I release a book, have a pre-order ready to go. So the thing is with Amazon, they don't like to give you a lot of, they're not very forgiving if you miss a pre-order date. I think you can't do another one for like a year or something. I'm not sure. I've never missed a date, thank goodness. But yeah, so you really have to make sure you hit that pre-order date. So I've never, knock on wood, I've never so far missed a deadline for a release. So fingers crossed.
I hope I've no jinxed you.
I know. I'm sure I'll be fine. No, the next one I've got about over 40,000 words in, and I generally aim for about 50 to 60,000 on them. So I can generally churn out generally a 10,000 words easy in a week. So, and sometimes more depending. So I'm on course. I have to have the next book to my editor by the middle of next month. So I've got a good chunk of time left to go to play with. So I'm not nervous yet. So
does your brain ever switch off? Do you ever sleep or, a downtime kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, that definitely that. I mean, before I left crime reporting, my brain was on, like, it was just it was a disaster zone in there already. So like I just had so much going on. I mean, it was just the stress was off the charts at that point, and it was just so yeah, everything was just so I was having crazy insomnia. I was just like there was just I wasn't getting much sleep at all at that point, and just the brain just did not shut off. So I've tried do things like yoga. I try that. I've tried, a little bit of meditation. I've tried things to try to switch it off in the past, and it wasn't happening. Now that I'm doing this full time, yeah, my brain definitely switches off. Now I can I do my work. I do do my writing. I do my social media stuff. I do my advertising, marketing, whatever needs to get done that day. And then I've actually got time to do fun stuff. Well, that's fun. I actually do find it fun. I should clarify. It's a weird job because it feels like it's not a job. Like it feels like I'm on holiday all the time in a way, even though I still put in long hours, but they're fun hours, so I don't feel like I'm working. So yeah, I mean, generally I'm getting my stuff done now though, and I can actually go and read a book. Like there was a point of time there where I wasn't reading anything because I just didn't have time, and it just felt like it was just, and plus, I mean, my brain wasn't working either. By the time I'd get to the end of my workday, I was like, okay, I got to put the TV on and just sit here and veg like for an hour before bed, because that's the only way I'm going to sleep. But now I can actually, well, I still watch shows. So I still like that. But yeah, now I can actually read. I can go for walks. I can do yoga, like a proper, like an hour-long sort of practice or whatever. And there's time for all that. And then, yeah, I've just rediscovered what it's like to feel relaxed, which is a lovely thing.
I bet you still get ideas just popping in randomly
all the time, but it's great ideas. Like it's fun. Like it's just, I've got a little running thing on Evernote, a little a list. Every time I come up with a story idea, I plug it in there, because I've made the mistake in the past where I come up with something in the middle of the day and I don't write it down thinking I'll remember it later, and it's gone, and then I feel like horrible. So
I'm kind of the same. Maybe ideas, it could be any time, day or night. I could be watching a horror film or Gordon Ramsay or whoever, and I'll just an idea of, wait a minute, why don't we try this? Well, we could do that. And you're just going to switch off for an hour or two or whatever, but the idea still kind of pop into your head. Now, you're a big fan of, I'm watching it. I don't want to keep you too long though, but you're a big fan of Scotland.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love Scotland. I was supposed to be there right now, I think, as you know. I'm coming in September. So yeah, we had some stuff going on here with with the airline that I was supposed to be flying on, where the pilots were potentially going to be going on strike right at the time I was supposed to come. So I thought, okay, I didn't want to take the chance, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work for rescheduling. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to reschedule and just be done with it. And then, I mean, we had some family health stuff going on too. So it actually worked out really well anyway for me to be here right now. So anyway, so now I'm scheduled to go back to Scotland in September. But yeah, I lived there for about a year in Edinburgh. And yeah, it was absolutely just, so it's fantastic. I mean, I'm a huge, I know we've talked about this too. I'm a huge history lover. So just sort of being able to be in the middle of all that was amazing. I mean, I also have Scottish ancestry, so there's that as well. So it's kind of like, in a sense, it's kind of like sort of like a little bit like coming home in a way. It does feel like home to me when I go back. I could easily live there again at some point in the future, because it really feels, there's like that second home feel to me whenever I go there. It's just an amazing place. And the people are so amazing too. I find everybody that I've met is just laid back and got such a great sense of humor. And, it's something I've been fortunate, I guess, in that way. I think I've been surrounded by a really good group of people over there. So I've still got a lot of friends I keep in touch with and go and see whenever I get back, and gives me an excuse to visit. So
I will, September, it's only a couple of months away, because as we were meeting up, but we're still meeting up in September. You're not getting out of that one.
No, that'd be awesome.
That's happened. But no, Edinburgh is a beautiful city. The people are nice. Glaswegians are better, but
I know. I'll just have to say I agree. There you go.
No, seriously, we love Edinburgh. We've been in Edinburgh, so we spent so much. It's like a second home to us, and especially the Royal Mile area, Greyfriars, the vaults and everything. There's just so much history in that. Well, there's history all over in Edinburgh, obviously, but just that area, the Royal Mile, up and down there, the amount of history that's there is unbelievable. And Greyfriars is a place where you never get. I mean, I must have been in Greyfriars maybe 60, 70 times or something, dozens of times, and it's a place that never gets old. Never gets boring. Doesn't matter how many times you go, even going up and down the Royal Mile. We've seen it countless times, as you did yourself probably, but you still love seeing it. Yeah,
it's a thing. Like, I think we were talking earlier about the fact in Canada, like, we just don't have, I mean, we've got a really long history here, in terms of the Indigenous people and all of that. But in terms of, Westerners kind of coming in and what we have here now, and we don't have that long of a history, like, in terms of our presence here, obviously. And the other thing is, our climate is so horrible in the winter. Like, in my province where I live, it's not unusual in winter to get minus 40 temperatures. So it's brutal. And and then you get wind chill on top of that, and it can be even worse. So places like location, like, basically you've got places built of wood, they're just not going to last for all those years. So we don't have a whole lot of physical history here to look at, which is, I think, why, as a Canadian, when I go to Scotland, I'm just in heaven, because, like, I can walk around and you can walk down the street and look at the places that you've read about, like, they're still there. And that's what I love. I mean, I love the fact, as a history lover and somebody who loves learning all about what came before in these places, and the fact that I can read about it in a book, and then I can go and, like, look at the place. Like, to me, that's just amazing. And I think, just being a big geek, I sound like a total geek now, but
no, there's nothing a geek. I mean, there's nothing geeky about it. So
I don't mind. I'm happy to be a geek. I've been a geek my whole life, so it doesn't bother me.
We'll all be geeks together, though. I mean, because we're big history people as well. I was yesterday we covered the unveiling of the Wall of Soaking. I spoke to quite a few people, and we're talking about history and what have you, and how history makes us who we are, what we are, and a lot of people, the people I spoke to yesterday basically were the mindset that history has you tell it's getting late at night here, can you?
Of course.
It should be taught a lot more. There's not enough history taught. I mean, I'll confess, when I was at school, I get kicked out of history because I just was not interested at all. None of it.
None of it's interesting when you're in school. That's the problem, right? So yeah.
They're trying to tell you about cavemen and Henry VIII and stuff, and you're like that staring out the window. Enough's enough. But no, we love history, but it's such an important part of Scotland as well. Edinburgh, there's that much on the Royal Mile, and there's things that used to be there that are long gone, but they're still and you can still go and look, and like the gold bricks we were talking about last week. I don't know if you remember or not.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. Yeah, which I hadn't been aware of, so that's awesome.
You see, there you go. It was a wee bit of
I did.
Right. That was the shape of the old toll booth prison. It's amazing the amount of people that don't know that.
No, I know.
And even with William Wallace, with the film Braveheart, and I'll put my hand up, and I did admit this yesterday. Before Braveheart came out, I'd heard of William Wallace, but to me, it was just a guy that ran about the fields killing Englishmen. But then after the film Braveheart came out, it makes you more aware of who the man was, and you realise, well, wait a minute, he just didn't kill, Englishmen. There was a lot more to this guy than people actually know. And the same goes for Edinburgh. I mean, people go into, like say, Greyfriars, for instance. They'll probably walk around Greyfriars and look at the headstones and, oh, that's a nice one. Oh, that's nice. But they never actually stand and read them.
Yeah.
And you can get the whole history of family just for a headstone.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about cemeteries and graveyards is that history. I mean, that's so true though? Like you can just walk around and I mean, you can say the same about ghosts, really. I mean, they're sort of like an embodiment of history, right? I mean, I think that's the thing. It's just having that in front of you is sort of pretty amazing, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the fascination for me, anyway.
It's all fascinating for me. It's all fascinating for me. But I'm going to wind up there just now. I know you're a busy lady, but I want to bring you back to do a paranormal side of Heather.
Sure, for sure.
How's that sound?
Oh, I'm happy doing whatever. So it's always nice chatting with you. So absolutely.
But I'll keep a hold of you just for a couple of seconds after we come off, though. So what's next up for Sullivan?
Well, I've got that next book that is coming out. Let me think. End of July is when that one's due out. So that one's going to have Sully and Des, his brother, kind of investigating what's called the House of Mirrors. Basically, I always wanted to do a fairground story, like sort of a haunted amusement park attraction. So that's what this is.
Oh, so, do you ever see that film? Oh, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's about a fairground. And there's a guy in a killer in it.
No, it doesn't sound familiar yet, but
it just goes about this fairground slaughtering people.
Oh my. It'll never make you want to go to the fair again.
Just when you said mirrors and fairground, I watched it a few weeks ago, and this guy just goes nuts. He just I don't know if you like blood and guts, but I'll mail you.
Okay.
Just sorry, it was just when you said the mirrors and that.
No, for sure.
He goes into the fairground and he just
oh jeez.
People lose limbs and appendages.
Oh no. Okay.
Sorry, carry on. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Makes sense. Okay, perfect.
You were saying about the mirrors and the fairground kind of story.
Oh, yeah. So it's basically just takes place in this House of Mirrors sort of thing. Like it's kind of a combination of just kind of your haunted fairground thing. But I also kind of wanted to explore that whole idea of, the Victorians had that whole, I don't know what you call, it's not a legend per se, what's the word I'm looking for, but they had that practice of covering mirrors whenever somebody passed away, so the soul wouldn't get trapped in the glass. So they cover the mirrors and the windows and everything. So I kind of wanted this. I thought, well, it'd be kind of interesting to have the ghost trapped in these mirrors. So he just sees this woman in the mirrors and everywhere. So he's sort of struggling to communicate with her because there's this pane of glass between them, which is kind of a first for him. So anyway, it's kind of an opportunity to explore that kind of history as well of that kind of that mirror practice, I guess.
I think the mirror I think it was, I might be wrong, I think it was a superstition.
Yeah, that's probably a better word for it. Yeah, that's the word.
They cover up the mirrors to keep the spirit trapped in the mirror, basically. I think it was a superstition. But I need the name of that film. It's going to annoy me.
Wow. You'll have to go off and find it now.
I will find it. Trust me, I will find it, bugger. No, I hate it when that happens, but it probably happens to myself as well. You'll
happens to me.
A line. I'm really, really bad for it. It's a line for a film, for example, pop into my head, and it'll annoy me, and it could be days, or it could be weeks.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I'll just say, Smokey and the Bandit. What? She's Smokey and that film I was talking about months ago, that line, is with Smokey and the Bandit.
It's true. You know what? I mean, now I'm finding that my best friends are Google and IMDb, because whenever I don't know, I have a really bad habit of seeing an actor or an actress on something and knowing I've seen them somewhere, but I cannot place them. So I love IMDb has become my best friend, because now I can just go onto there and look them up and see what they were in. But before that, I mean, I grew up before internet, as so wow. It was like, okay, back then it was just like, you just had to hope it would come to you at 2 a.m, because that was the only hope you had.
It's so frustrating. Like somebody else said it was sure. Weeks and weeks ago, and I thought, sure, that's for a film. I remember it was for a film. It was a guy that said it, but nobody had a clue what I was talking about. And it turned out it was a film, Trapped in Paradise. Now, I remember that it took me about 3 weeks for it to click. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Trapped in Paradise with Nicolas Cage. The film.
I don't think I've seen that one. No, it doesn't sound familiar. I know I was trying to place it. I've seen a number of Nicolas Cage films. I don't think I've seen that one.
He works in a restaurant, and it's John Malkovich is in it as well.
Yeah. Good old John Malkovich, yeah.
He's got two. Nicolas Cage works in a restaurant, and his two brothers come to him to say that they need to go to this place called Paradise to pick something up, and can he run them? But they're conning him. But it ends up a car breaks down, and they get trapped in this town, Paradise, over Christmas, and they try to rob a bank, and it all goes all right. It's a comedy. It's a really good film. But that's for no John Lovitz. It is not John Malkovich.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's John Lovitz that turns around and says, "Sure." It's totally weird. Sounds totally nuts, but it was just these two. Sure. I remember that for a film.
Yeah.
What? So, trust me.
Oh, I get what you're saying. I know. I've been in that position as well, so I totally understand.
Anybody just tuning in, I no wonder what the hell we're talking about. That's what happens on our shows. Sometimes, we can talk paranormal for 5 minutes, and then the rest is just cooking recipes or camping or.
Well, we got in a lot of paranormal chat, I think, so that was good.
So don't know, but I might bring you back for just a paranormal one. Obviously,
sure. Absolutely.
Okay. I'll hold on to you just for a wee couple of seconds here, and come off, so don't disappear on me.
I will hang around.
We'll wind up here, folks. Remember, and you drove me Maz Faye. What? You drove me Maz Faye says. You drove me Maz Faye says with shoes. I don't know what that's Laura. She's down the stairs actually. It's her husband, man. I don't know what that means. You drove me Maz fee. I don't know what that means. However, for days, you drove me mad for days. Was sure. Aye, that's what it was. But might give Heather a look up on Amazon and check out her books, Sullivan Gray series, folks, and you will be seeing her again when we talk paranormal. But we're going to wind up there.
Just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, and thanks to anyone who's watching. I appreciate you tuning in.
And it's been a pleasure having you. And watch out in September when Heather's over here, because we will be meeting up in Edinburgh for a wander.
That'll be great.
So that's us for tonight, folks. We're back on Thursday night with Lost Souls Paranormal. Mickey, you drove me mad for days with sure predictor Texas pay. There you go. Mystery solved. So we'll say goodnight just now, folks. And thanks for coming. And enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll be back on Thursday. Cheers out. Bye. Bye.